Hey folks, and welcome back to the Sarcast. Today is a mix of a rant and a rave. The Mass Effect 3 Extended Cut DLC was released on Tuesday, and in this episode we will be going through how I felt the new DLC compares to the original endings of Mass Effect 3, and given that Mass Effect 3 was the last of the trilogy, how it finished off the entire Mass Effect series to date. So going back to the original release of Mass Effect 3 and the endings therein, what I'm about to go through is largely a paraphrasing of the blog post I made when Mass Effect 3 first came out and I got to the ending. So essentially back then what I wrote was that the outcry about the ending was that none of your choices mattered. No matter what you did across any or all of the three games in their entirety, none of those choices mattered whatsoever. So no matter what choices you made, what people you saved are condemned to death and destruction. No matter what way you played the game, either as Paragon or Renegade, as a saint or a genocidal dickhead, the illogical and rushed final came down to a limp, illogical and just downright confused exposition and a triple choice, if you'd even call it a choice. So basically it turned out that Reapers were controlled by an AI that lives on the Citadel, which was a Reaper device all along. Now at the end you were magically transported to this secret location on the Citadel that nobody knew about. You speak to this AI, aka the Starbrat, and it was represented by the image of a boy you saw dying in the game's opening sequence. The exposition and the reason for the Reapers doing what they do is this. Organic races will inevitably create synthetic life. These synthetics, in turn, will for one reason or another fight their creators, usually wiping them out. So the Reaper AI decided to fix this problem, and to prevent the creations of organics wiping out their creators every cycle, the Reapers fixed this by doing it basically for themselves. Yeah, exactly. So as for your choice of ending, you got either control the Reapers and send them back off into dark space or whatever. Synthesis, which fused organic and synthetic life, which basically gave the Reapers no reason to harvest species anymore, and thereby ending their raison d'etre, and again sending them away presumably. Or the third choice then was destroy the Reapers, potentially all life in the galaxy as well if you didn't have a high enough effective military strength, which was itself illogical, because why would it matter to the Citadel or the Crucible when it sends out that massive shockwave and energy pulse how many species you've gathered together to fight against the Reapers, as to whether it actually wipes out all life or not. But even looking at those choices, you might not think to yourself, it's not so bad. At least there's a good bit of variation between choices. Well, the kicker was for many people that no matter what option you chose, you got exactly the same ending, with only sort of minor variations. In every single ending, the Citadel blew up, which sent out the massive shockwave of energy, which was colour filtered red, blue or green, depending on what your choice was. This shockwave went out across the galaxy with a massive burst pinpointed at the nearest relay. That then relayed out to the other mass relays across the entire galaxy, thereby destroying each mass relay along its path. The major problem, narrative-wise, that people had as well with the original endings was the Normandy inexplicably running away, and the squad mates that you had with you on Earth, not just 5 minutes ago, somehow magically appeared back on the Normandy while it was fleeing. Normandy then failed to outrun the shockwave, got damaged and got stranded on some inexplicable remote alien world. You never saw what became of your squad mates or Earth after your choice. You just got them coming out of the ship on the jungle planet and looking towards a bright and hopeful future. And then at the end you got a lame text message saying, oh, and don't forget to buy our DLCs. Okay, thanks, bye. So the original endings basically left everybody. All the species you had gathered, the Quarians, the Geth, the Krogan, all these species you had gathered together to fight the Reapers were then, with the destruction of the mass relays, all either stranded around a war-torn and stricken Earth, or alternatively all wiped out, because as earlier DLC had already established, i.e. the Arrival DLC, when you destroy a mass relay, it unleashes a massive explosion, which is basically akin to that of a supernova, and basically wiped out the entire Batarian solar system when it went up in the Arrival DLC. So presumably, if you destroy the mass relay in the Sol system, it's going to completely destroy Earth's solar system as well. So that was one problem that most people had. It was a bit illogical and confused. and left all these species, this massive army you'd gathered, all basically stranded around Earth. So the ending wasn't just a portrayal of the game's core concepts of it, the main characters and thus your ideals or the fans' loyalty for playing the games over the past 5 years, but it was also a portrayal of the very sense of logic holding the entire game universe together, and the stream of promises made by BioWare over the course of the build-up to the final game. Another problem people had with the original ending was that we were promised prior to the game's release that you wouldn't need to play multiplayer in order to get the best ending for the game. In order to get the best ending for the game, you needed to play multiplayer. You needed to get your galactic readiness over 4,000, which was not possible playing through the single player game on its own. The most you could get playing through the single player was around about 3,500, which wasn't anywhere near enough to actually unlock the final scene with Shepard breathing in amongst all the rubble. So it was down to the amount of promises that BioWare broke, that they made prior to the game's release and then broke upon the game's release, and the conclusions in the original version of the game left many fans just going, what the actual fuck? Is that it? And there was a huge sense of disappointment and lack of closure for players of the game, because some people have played this game for well over 130 hours from Mass Effect 1 through to the end of Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 1 I played for 50 hours, Mass Effect 2 I played for another 50 hours, and then Mass Effect 3 was 20 hours shorter, at 30 hours long. And that's fairly obvious because they had to put so much work into the mediocre multiplayer mode that the game was forced to be shipped with so they could further monetize the game, which is something that a lot of BioWare fans find a bit distasteful as well. Because ever since EA bought them out, which is a move every BioWare fan back then was massively wary of when it was announced, BioWare quality-wise have been on a very slippery slope. Long gone are the days of Baldur's Gate and Knights of the Old Republic. Now they're all about monetizing their products, leveraging the customer base for more cash, and eroding the RPG elements in their games in pursuit of the mass market. Whilst Mass Effect 1 to 3 were all excellent games, well, up until the last 15 months of the third game anyway, compare them as an RPG to Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights and Knights of the Old Republic. They just do not stand up. Since the release of Mass Effect and the Dragon Age series, EA's influence has grown more and more steadily over BioWare. I mean, it happens with every single game studio that's respected by the fans for their integrity and vision. Lionhead, Westwood, Black Isle, Rare, BioWare. They're just the names of a few of the companies that released games pre-buyout that were beloved by the fans. And look what happened to them after their buyouts. Peter Molyneux recently left Lionhead to set up his own studio. They therefore lost their most creative influence. Rare, they haven't produced a good game in years, not since the N64 days. Black Isle and Westwood both got shut down by their so-called parent companies after their sales tailed off. Wonder why that happened. And BioWare starting to approach that same self-abyss. So in summary, the original endings were derided or hated by the fan base because they're basically identical. You got colour-filtered explosions. What's your favourite colour? Red, blue or green? And there was no consequences shown of your actual final choice, whether it was red, blue or green. There was no reflection of the in-game choices you had made throughout Mass Effect 1, 2, or in fact the third game itself. None of those choices were actually shown to have an impact on the finale of the game itself or the series. There were narrative plot holes such as Joker and Normandy suddenly showing up fleeing from the battle, your squad mates suddenly disappearing from your side and ending up on the Normandy somehow, the sudden appearance of the Starbrat. What the fuck? They were promised there wouldn't be any sort of ABC choice. Well, guess what? We were promised that you wouldn't need to play multiplayer to boost your EMS for the best ending. That was a lie. The endings themselves were short and basically not so sweet, and there was no closure with your squad mates. So after the huge furore from the fan base over the original endings, and it was huge, I've never seen any sort of outcry about a game or a film or a book, anything like it before in my life. And it just shows the power that the fanbase actually does have, that BioWare have actually turned around now, worked for the past 3 months and produced these 3 new endings, plus an additional 4th ending. So the new endings then, they are a lot better. They're not perfect, but they're better. The endings now are actually differentiated depending on your choice. And it's not the same exact identical ending for each one, for each choice. They are now different and fuller. It still retains the same colour filtered explosions, but it also then goes on to show you the consequences of each choice. Even if those consequences, half of the running time for the endings, are actually shown as a PowerPoint slideshow. However, it still doesn't reflect your in-game choices throughout all 3 games. But I think at this point it would be tough for BioWare to actually include that in the ending and to take account of all the variables that have built up in your game save file over the course of 150 hours or whatever it is that you've played the games for. The plot holes, the Joker and the Normandy one was explained. They were basically forced by Hackett to disengage and flee the scene because the Crucible/Citadel were about to blow up. Your squad mate's sudden appearance back on the Normandy was explained by an insert cutscene on the run to the beam, which you can see in my previous vid. When you eventually then get to Starbrat, there's more exposition with the Starbrat, giving more explanation as to what it is, what the Reapers are, why they were created, how they came to be. There still is the ABC ending, but now there's also a 4th ending, which is basically fuck you Starbrat, which I think was a tip of the hat from BioWare to the fans that said they wanted an option to reject the Starbrat's choices. Well, BioWare gave them one, and it says basically if you choose this, you fail. Now you don't need to use multiplayer to get the breath scene. You need an EMS score of 3100 or above, which is easily achievable if you play through all the missions in the single player game. I played through all the missions prior to knowing what EMS I needed, and my final EMS score was around about 3400, 3300, 3400, somewhere like that, which was more than enough to get the breath scene, although not in the original version of the endings. The actual endings themselves are longer, they're fuller, they're more detailed. Like I said, even if half of that running time is a PowerPoint slideshow, there are additional rendered cutscenes, and there are also additional in-game engine scenes, which gives you more closure with your squad mates. Shows your squad mates actually putting your name up on a memorial wall, or if you chose the destroy ending and had a high enough EMS score to actually live, then it shows your love interest then actually just hesitating before they put your plaque up on the wall. And also there's an additional female stargazer scene after the fuck you ending. So all in all, the endings were better. Like I said, they're not perfect, but they're better. If these endings had been the original endings that had shipped with the game, there wouldn't have been the outcry that there was over the games, because a lot of the people that played through the games, their problems with the ending was that it was just so short, identical, and inconsequential as to what choice you actually made. Here, however, your choices do matter in that you're shown the consequences of your choice, and you're told what effect your actions have had on your squad mates, the rest of the galaxy, and the other races. So there's a lot more variance between the 3 endings, well, the 4 endings really. So your choice at the end really has repercussions. Lol. So all in all, it's a lot better, and whilst not perfect, it goes a long way to satisfying the wants and the needs of those who found so much dissatisfaction with the original endings.